Good morning, and welcome to the online worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Idaho Falls. I am the Reverend Kevin Carson, and joining me in the sanctuary this morning is today's technical assistant, Andrew White, and we are thankful, as always, for the wonderful music provided by Jessica Kuipers. If you've joined us this morning, we ask that you sign into the chat box so we can know who is out there in our virtual community today. You can also use the chat box to express joys, sorrows, and concerns that will be read aloud later in the service after the time for all ages. If you do use the chat box, please do so soon, and please include your name and indicate whether you're expressing a joy, a sorrow, or a concern. One announcement I have this morning is that we are asking for people to submit photos to include in our online slideshow during the Christmas Eve service. Please send us a digital photo of your holiday decorations, your family, or whatever else you would like to share with us to celebrate the season. You can send them to worship@idahofallsuu.org. And finally, I want to remind everyone that we are in the middle of our annual pledge drive, which is extremely important to the ongoing mission of this church. Please remember to return your pledge cards, and there are two ways to give to the church. There is a Give button on our website where you can donate by PayPal, or you can mail a check in the old-fashioned way to the P.O. Box address listed on the website. We will now enter into the sacred time of our worship. As I ring the peace bowl 3 times, take a breath and relax. Let us enter this quiet space and time together. Now please enjoy the music of our prelude. When we are together in person, we join in reading our covenant aloud. As I read the covenant this morning, I invite you to join me in your home, if you like. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. As I light our chalice this morning, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, I invite you to light a candle or chalice with me in your own home. The words for our chalice lighting are from Marjorie Montgomery. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and mysteries of this great gift. Our call to worship this morning is the poem Gratitude by Gary Snyder, which was modeled after a Mohawk prayer. Gratitude to Mother Earth, sailing through night and day, and to her soil, rich, rare, and sweet, in our minds, so be it. Gratitude to plants, the sun-facing, light-changing leaf and fine root hairs, standing still through wind and rain. Their dance is the flowing spiral grain in our minds, so be it. Gratitude to air, bearing and soaring swift, and the silent owl at dawn. Breath of our song, clear spirit breeze in our minds, so be it. Gratitude to wild beings, our brothers, teaching secrets, freedoms, and ways, who share with us their milk, self-complete, brave and aware, in our minds, so be it. Gratitude to water, clouds, lakes, rivers, glaciers, holding or releasing, streaming through all our bodies' salty seas, in our minds, so be it. Gratitude to the sun, blinding, pulsing light through trunks of trees, through mists, warming caves where bears and snakes sleep. He who wakes us, in our minds, so be it. Gratitude to the great sky, who holds billions of stars and goes yet beyond that, beyond all powers and thoughts, and yet is within us, grandfather space. The mind is his wife, so be it. I invite you to join in singing our opening hymn, number 349, We Gather Together. Our time for all ages this morning is about 5 kernels of corn. Thanksgiving has been a cherished American holiday to celebrate with our families for over 150 years. And these days, we're starting to understand that some of the old stories about the Pilgrims and what happened to the Native Americans after they arrived are not completely true. What we do know is true is that when the Pilgrims arrived 400 years ago in November on Cape Cod, on the coast of what is now Massachusetts, they were sick and starving. Many did not survive the ocean voyage, and many more would die within the year. When they left England, they thought they were prepared, but they really didn't know what they were getting into. Their food supply had gotten so low that they probably would have all perished were it not for 4 bushels of dried corn they found buried in baskets when they were out exploring the new land. For the Pilgrims, the corn was a gift from heaven. What they didn't understand was that the corn was actually the winter food supply and summer seed corn of the Nauset people who lived on the Cape, and they had stored it there for safety. But even with the corn, the food supplies continued to dwindle, and according to legend, they reached a point where there was only enough left for each person to have 5 kernels of corn a day to eat. As I hope you can see in my hand, this seems like a really tiny amount of food to even be worth cooking. So many people doubt the story is accurate. Even so, we know for sure they were starving that first winter. Once spring came in 1621, with the assistance of the local Wampanoag people, they learned how to plant crops that would grow in America, and they began to prosper. About 200 years later, in the early 1800s, the people in New England began to celebrate Thanksgiving long before the rest of America. And many people had a tradition of placing 5 kernels of corn on each person's plate before the big holiday meal to remind them to be grateful for the food they were about to eat. Each person would pick up 1 kernel of corn, and one at a time, they would say something about what they were grateful for. And then the next person, and so on until 5 turns had passed. When I read about this tradition many years ago, we started doing this in Thanksgiving in our home, and it is something I wanted to share with you this morning. Now we will enter a special part of our service when we join in sharing the major events of our lives, our joys, sorrows, and concerns, so that we may lift them up in community and hold each other in loving support. As we read each joy, sorrow, or concern out loud, we will light a candle.
So we have a joy from Roby Cartmel. She says, today is Bob's birthday, so happy birthday, Bob. And similarly, we have a joy from Alan McCready, who's thankful for his friend Bob, and happy birthday to him. We have another joy from Karen Shropshire. She is thankful that so many people who stayed home for the holidays and protected themselves and others and with generous care and their consideration. Another joy from Amanda Logan. She's thankful for all of the cell phones, photo, internet, and video technology that allow us to stay in touch with friends and family. And then we have a sorrow from Dennis Jorgensen. He has a sorrow that his brother-in-law's brother died from COVID.
Finally, we light one more candle for all the joys, concerns, and sorrows that remain unspoken, but in our hearts. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from A Life of Being, Having, and Doing Enough by Wayne Muller. In the Genesis story, the Creator works for 6 days, shaping the green, fluid beauty of the earth with life everywhere. Birds and fish and beasts of the fields, verdant trees, flowers, fragrances wafting gently on breezes that circle this fresh, fertile orb of life. On the 7th day, the Creator rests. For now, this is enough. In the Hebrew Bible, the word for this rest can literally be read, and God exhaled. God exhaled. When do we exhale? Perhaps like God, we exhale when we feel certain that our good and necessary work is done. What then is our work on the earth? In a world gone mad with speed, potential, and choice, we continually overestimate what we can do, build, fix, care for, or make happen in one day. We overload our expectations on ourselves and others, inflate our real and imaginary possibilities, until our fierce and tender human heart finally collapses under the restless pressure of impossible demands. No living organism can sustain this kind of violent overwork before it breaks or dies. In addition to numerous well-documented benefits of a more gently restful life on our overall health, increased longevity, reduction in stress, a stronger immune system, increased happiness and well-being, among many others, there are religious precepts and commandments, like the Sabbath commandment in the Hebrew Bible, that prescribe days of rest, prayer, nourishment, and renewal as essential to a life well lived. Why then are we so reluctant to ever stop, be still, or allow our work to feel sufficient for this day? I invite you to join in singing our next hymn, number 68, Come, Ye Thankful People, Come. There is a Buddhist saying that life is filled with 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows, and we must embrace them both. Sometimes it feels like the holiday season between Thanksgiving and Christmas is filled with at least that many joys and sorrows on its own. And with the pandemic and the recent election still looming large, The anxiety and stress is even more magnified this year. If ever there was a time to stop and exhale, now would be a good one. I hope all of you were able to stop and exhale in the last few days and enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday, at least in some reimagined form. It is right and good for us to pause and celebrate now and then. It is good to give thanks for all that sustains us and to reflect on our relationships with family and friends. We in America have much for which to be thankful. But as we all know, not everyone has the privilege of enjoying the feast even in more normal times. Despite the abundance all around us, many of our fellow citizens face hunger and the lack of food security on a daily basis and can ill afford the luxury of a festive meal. Still others are homeless or trapped in isolated lives of quiet desperation. Poverty is very real, and the gap between the poor and the rich continues to widen and reinforced by policies that rig the game in favor of those who have the most. Even for those of us with enough means, this Thanksgiving holiday, centered on the idea of pausing to give thanks, is in danger of evolving into something altogether different, a celebration of consumerism run amok. At some point a few decades ago, the idea of the day after Thanksgiving sale was born in the minds of marketers who wanted to jumpstart the Christmas shopping season. Since many people were off for the long weekend, why not entice them into shopping earlier with a promise of great deals, cheaper stuff that means we can get even more stuff for the same amount of money? Who doesn't want to save money and have more stuff after all? And in typical American fashion, this day of shopping frenzy has grown larger and larger, becoming known as Black Friday, the new high holiday of the cult of American consumerism. Although the exact origin of the moniker is unclear, by the 1980s, retailers began to equate Black Friday with sales aimed at being in the black financially after a lackluster year. These days, consumers have embraced Black Friday as an occasion to be celebrated in its own right. Not only has the ominous-sounding event crept into the weekend that follows, in the mid-2000s, when online shopping became more significant, it was joined by other shopping holidays such as Cyber Monday. That has now morphed into Cyber Week, and with advertising extending sales before and after the traditional weekend now, it's hard to keep track of how and when we are supposed to be shopping. But wait, there's more. Not content to open stores as early as midnight on Thanksgiving evening, some retailers are now open all or part of Thanksgiving Day, never mind the pandemic. Some people have even started calling Thanksgiving Day Gray Thursday. Where will the madness end? I, for one, refuse to refer to Thanksgiving Day as Gray Thursday, nor do I feel compelled to shop on that day. Some people have to work on Thanksgiving because they have jobs that don't stop for the holidays. But normal commerce is not in that category. Growing up with a mother who was a hospital nurse, our family understood that sometimes Mom couldn't be with us most of Thanksgiving Day, and we adjusted our plans accordingly. But asking people to give up precious time with family simply in the name of profit is ridiculous, even if we are limited this year to gatherings of immediate family only. But despite the best efforts of marketers, there are a few deliberate attempts to reverse this trend. A few years ago, for example, the outdoor retailer REI decided to close on Thursday and Friday of Thanksgiving week, and they encouraged people to get out and enjoy time in the outdoors. I have seen several other recent ads from retailers taking a similar approach. It'll be interesting to see if such efforts to buck the trends of consumerism remain successful as online shopping becomes even more important. There's also a movement to celebrate so-called Buy Nothing Day instead of Black Friday. In Providence, Rhode Island, a group has even taken the idea a step further, creating a free coat exchange day after Thanksgiving where people are encouraged to donate coats and other winter clothing or take one if they're in need. This event has been successful for over 2 decades, but I don't know if they were able to do it this year because of the pandemic. And if you're like me, you've probably seen a deluge of emails about Giving Tuesday, when nonprofit organizations are also trying to tap into the spending frenzy of the holiday season, at least with more noble intentions. So many days we are urged to spend money to celebrate the season. It is true there's a need for wealth to flow around to sustain the present economic system we inhabit, but it just feels like there's some critical limit we are fast approaching. In our Western culture, we have come to glorify the idea that we are always in some kind of competition with everyone else. And one sure sign of success is to have more than other people, more money, a bigger house, a fancier car, and so on. When we partner with someone in marriage, we are supposed to keep up with the Joneses to gauge our success in life. We are hit with an onslaught of advertising that promises us happiness can be easily purchased. It is only a shopping spree or a mouse click away. It is a virtual idolatry of stuff. But do we really need more stuff? Will it really make us happier somehow? Even if we know our basic needs are met, the fear of not keeping up with others may drive us to covet more and more. And in the end, we may never be satisfied that we have enough. And while we drown in a sea of consumer products, there are far too many people in the world who wake up every day with the anxiety of not knowing whether they will have enough food, water, clothing, shelter, or access to health care to keep themselves or their families alive for another day. This is a fact of life for billions of our fellow human beings, people for whom the prayer for our daily bread is not just a metaphor. It is a moral failure that we should allow such disparity to continue. It is contrary to the teachings of almost every religious tradition, and certainly our own, but it is far too easy to ignore. There is another way that offers a possible way forward. It is the idea of enoughness. In an economy of enoughness, it is not the individual accumulation of material possessions that is valued. Rather, it is balance and harmony, a collaborative community that recognizes that we are all part of an interconnected whole. Sustainability of the whole is how we measure success. It is the way of nature. Nature does not favor excess. Rather, as Bill McKibben said, nature schools us in efficiency. Its aesthetic and its economy demonstrate enoughness at every turn. Just as nature strikes a balance between the plants and animals that make up a healthy ecosystem, in an enoughness economy, the consumption of resources is kept to a level that can be sustained over time. This does not depend on some utopian ideal where everyone gets an equal share, and it is not a call for severe asceticism. But it does put limits on runaway consumption by a very few. It is more about intentionality. It is a question of discerning what is truly good and valuable, seeking balance, making decisions and moving on, finding a middle way that allows some wants along with the needs so that we may better enjoy life. It is easy to gauge when our choices for living sustainably are on track by looking at our ecological footprint. This idea, which has become popular in recent decades, is a calculation that tells us how big of a slice of the Earth's resources as measured in land area that your lifestyle choices require. It takes into account factors like transportation, housing, and how much meat you consume. Depending on the model, the results vary somewhat, but even the most conservative models reveal that humanity as a whole is already living at a level that exceeds sustainable capacity, somewhere around 1.5 Earth equivalents. And when you look at the results of the average American consumer, it is even more troubling. If everyone on the planet lived like the average American, we would need as many as 24 Earths to sustain us. Clearly, this is not a path to a healthy future. This is a problem the human community will need to address together, and we Americans bear a particular responsibility. We need to explore new possibilities for simplifying our lives and reducing our impact on the earth. We could look at the way many indigenous people around the globe are still living today for guidance. By contemporary standards, many indigenous people who continue to live more closely with the natural world are poor, with very little material wealth and no access to the internet or other things we take for granted. But studies show they tend to be far more content than the average American. It doesn't mean that we have to embrace a primitive lifestyle to be happy, but if we are willing to step back and away from this insanity of consumer culture and pay more attention, there is much we could learn from them. Simply adapting their more sustainable focus on minimizing waste and emphasizing durability would be a good start. And we might benefit even more by considering how they spend their time and how they nurture their relationships. Material possessions are only part of the equation. The spiritual writer Mark Nepo describes what he calls experience greed that plagues modern society. It is the insidious grasping for socially active networks and opportunities for new experiences. It is a piling on of involvement in organizations, activities, and even sacred gatherings. All of these experiences may be good and otherwise benign when we look at them individually. But for many of us, we reach a point of saturation where too much of a good thing begins to obscure the truly meaningful moments of our lives. Life becomes a constant stream of soccer games, rehearsals, committees, concerts, and we have little time or energy left for ourselves, our family, or our friends. In this flood of experiences, we attempt to stay afloat through email and texting, but this just adds to the clutter and noise. Finding time to sit quietly, even for a few minutes, or pausing to be fully present to another person, becomes yet another task that gets lost in the overly ambitious expectations we set for ourselves each day. Maybe one good that can come from this pandemic is that we have been forced to slow down some of this frenetic quest for experiences. But the number of irresponsible large gatherings in the news shows just how unwilling many of us are to let go of this behavior. We need to stop and exhale. We need to cultivate stillness and listen to that still small voice within. We need to take time to discern for us what is enough. We need to give ourselves the gift of taking this internal journey, and we should be grateful for the privilege. It is a grace that most of us in America were born into a society that is stable and affluent enough to allow us the privilege of even thinking such thoughts. And this is not the case for everyone. I remember a poignant conversation a few years ago when I manned a sustainable food booth for a green sanctuary showcase at a congregation in Rhode Island. A congregant who worked as an advocate for the homeless asked me, "How do you expect poor people to worry about climate change or afford to buy organic, sustainably farmed food?" He raised a valid concern. Those of us who shop in the organic food section or have the privilege of driving to the local organic co-op often forget that our ideals can seem impossibly out of touch to many of our brothers and sisters on this earth. But that should not deter us from doing what we can. And it should make us even more aware and determined to help others live better, more equitable lives. Each day we are faced with a series of choices. If we are seeking a path to a life of contentment and authenticity, it is important to discern for ourselves in each of those moments what Wayne Muller calls the next right thing. We need to pay more attention to the small things, the bits and pieces of life that are blessings. We can begin to cultivate a sense of mindfulness and see each moment of our life as an ongoing pilgrim's journey rather than living for the fulfillment of some ideal. Having said that, it is even more important that we grant ourselves the mercy of failing miserably. No matter how closely we listen to our inner voice, there will be times when we run off the rails. To get back on track, we need to look at life on the human scale of day-to-day, decision by decision, rather than some overarching plan. I'm not saying that we should never plan for the future, for that is where our hopes and aspirations await. But as we work toward future goals, we must be prepared to alter our plans. The unexpected inevitably arises and new decisions have to be made. It is easy to become plagued by feelings of inadequacy when we fail to achieve our personal goals. We worry that we aren't doing enough for our children, or we aren't fighting hard enough for justice in the world. Instead, let us nurture acceptance and forgiving ourselves to move forward. If we cultivate a sense of doing enough today, every day, we can start to see life in more manageable chunks. This is such an important point, and for those of us dedicated to lives of service, doctors, nurses, clergy, aid workers, teachers, and such, I believe it is doubly important. It is easy to fall into the trap of trying to shoulder the weight of the world and to become overwhelmed by this impossible task. I'm reminded of the quote from E.B. White, who said, "I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve the world and a desire to enjoy the world. That makes it hard to plan the day." Friends, here is a truth we must accept. Solving the world's problems is not our work, it is the work. And it is work that will never be finished. It is not up to us to finish it. Like the masons who worked on the great cathedrals that took centuries to build, we play only a small part in a long story. The work is never done. Let us do the work we can do in our one precious lifetime without shouldering too much of the burden. Let us find the next right thing for us in a journey filled with challenges, a tension between suffering and grace. As we cultivate our sacred inner voice, we learn to see the world as it is, and we learn to appreciate the small blessings that come to us each day. Our hearts may begin to fill with gratitude, and we will feel more compassion for each other. But even as we sow the seeds of compassion, we must remember that we cannot control how those seeds will grow. We can only act with integrity and kindness and hope for the best. When we start doubting ourselves, dwelling on the fear that we haven't done enough, we begin to fall back into the familiar trap. Instead, let us cultivate enoughness in every moment, in every action, and let us do so with a profound sense of gratitude. I think I have now said enough. So let me close with an enoughness pledge developed by Vicky Robin. I pledge to discover how much is enough for me, to be truly fulfilled and consume only that. I also pledge to be part of the discovery of how much would be enough for everyone, not only to survive, but to thrive, and to find ways for them to have access to that. Through this commitment to restraint and justice, I am healing my life and am part of the healing of the world. I invite you to join in our closing hymn, number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. Our closing words are adapted from Accepting This by Mark Nepo. We cannot eliminate hunger, but we can feed each other. We cannot eliminate loneliness, but we can hold each other. We cannot eliminate pain, but we can live a life of compassion. Ultimately, we are small living things awakened in the stream, not gods who carve out rivers. There is nothing to do and nowhere to go. Accepting this, we can do everything and go anywhere. Now let us extinguish our chalice with these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As you enjoy our postlude, after you enjoy the postlude, please use the link to join our virtual coffee hour for discussion and community afterwards. Thanks.